takeovers made more difficult?
If the effect of that is to make the lives of sleepy managers easier, then my answer is an unreserved no. But I certainly think that the functioning of the market in corporate control, the takeover system, is part of the functioning of capital markets that it's proper for us to look at.
While all the political parties are now reviewing the existing system, others want a completely new type of relationship between companies and shareholders. The Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce has been exploring ideas for what they call tomorrow's company. John Neal, one of the project sponsors, has seen the city in action and thinks there must be a better way.
In the model we work in the UK, if you fail to live up to the city's expectations, they can and often will abandon a company at the speed of light. From time to time you will even exceed city expectations, but they might decide that you've gone ex-growth for a while and they'll abandon you at the speed of light. Now what that does is it actually almost acts like an unseen hand to drive all other organizational behavior to become short-term.
In the brave new world of tomorrow's company, John Neal sees shareholders becoming stakeholders. He meets regularly with colleagues at the RSA to refine these ideas.
Saying now, well, perhaps we can actually look at cash, because cash is a real driver for our business.
Yeah, I can see
the shareholders of the future, he believes, will have larger holdings in fewer companies. The endless turnover of shares would stop, and so investors would develop a long-term relationship with the companies they back.
In my view, the companies of the future will have substantial employee shareholders and shareholding involvement, and providers of capital who are committed to the mission of the company because they fundamentally understand what that company is trying to do.
But fund managers say the RSA's report misunderstands the British system. Relationships already exist between shareholders and companies. No revolution needed.
The Royal Society of Arts seems to be recommending that there should be some sort of relationship investing. We hear this, it's a catchphrase one hears in the United States, and we hear it more and more here. What I would say is that relationship investing exists in the United Kingdom and has done so for some time. So if the foundations are there, and if the two sides want to get together and talk to each other, I think that's all to the good. I don't think you need anything particularly radical to change that.
Fund managers like David Ruff meet companies at endless presentations and even the odd dinner. The city believes that the sort of relationships investors already have with the business community work well. And he's concerned that a largely successful system is facing a misguided assault.
None of us are perfect. We've all suffered from problems, whether it be city institutions, the UK government's attitude, management's attitude, or even Labour's attitude. But to lay the whole responsibility at the doorstep of city institutions, I believe, is wrong. And it would be wrong in the longer-term health of the UK industry if the government took precipitous action at the present time to try and correct what it believes to be a wrong.
With the publication of its long-awaited white paper on competitiveness, the government will soon signal a new enthusiasm for promoting British business. And the city is already on notice. Increasingly, the way the markets function is being questioned. They're no longer immune from attack, even by a Conservative government.
If you've glanced casually at the financial pages this week, or even at some of the front pages, You may have got the impression that the economy is at some kind of turning point, that economic recovery is not merely established, but that it's complete, at least to the point where we once again face a threat of inflation rising, leading to a Clark boom and the inevitable nemesis of yet another recession to cool it off. And that's exactly what the Governor of the Bank of England seems to think, as he made clear in a speech on Wednesday evening.
We have to avoid the excesses of the late 1980s. Much the most important task for monetary policy at the present time is to break the inflationary psychology which has prevailed for so long.
Well, like every other human being, Mr. George is entitled to his opinion. And if he wants to kiss the girls and make them cry with fantastic tales of looming inflation in the midst of the deepest depression of economic activity in 60 years, that's his privilege. But for the moment, it's still the Chancellor who's accountable to Parliament and to the rest of us for having interest rates at 5.25%, almost 2% higher than in Germany, at a time when the output of the economy is still rising barely fast enough to begin to float the economy off the seabed of the recession, and when underlying inflation has collapsed below 2%. In the bank's own inflation report last Tuesday, where professional economists imposed some objective standards on the governor's saber-rattling inclinations, the conclusion is that
the most likely outcome for retail price index inflation 2 years hence, excluding mortgage interest payments and indirect tax changes, is just under 3%.
They note 3 risks to that outlook. The first is that the amount of notes and coins in circulation have been rising a bit fast, but the bank's economists' comment on that is that it has limited inflationary consequences. The second is that inflationary expectations in the city, as measured by the difference between the yields on gilt-edged securities and the yields on those government bonds which are indexed against inflation, have risen. The inflation report notes that this measure
may be biased as an indicator of inflation expectations.
Thirdly, the bank notes a small rise in the growth of underlying earnings from 3 to 3.5% a year. When this was first reported, the Treasury dismissed it as simply reflecting a rise in overtime earnings as economic activity rose, and not as implying any inflationary upward creep in pay settlements. And the bank's economists firmly declare their conviction that
it should not be necessary for unemployment to remain at current levels to contain inflation.
And that is the crux of the matter. The economy needs to expand at about 1% a year faster than the long-term growth of its potential in order to take up the slack caused by the recession. And that means a bit over 3% a year for about 5 years, still without any risk of inflation. With interest rates above 5%, that isn't happening and it isn't likely, nor therefore is any real increase in the number of hours worked in the economy, and thus any real reduction in unemployment.